After getting destroyed by the Edmonton Oilers in the first round for 3 straight seasons, the LA Kings' future is in question. Especially with the LA Kings going after their big offseason addition in Pierre-Luc Dubois, who did practically nothing throughout the entire season. His future is also in question. And there has been some chatter as well. There could be a potential buyout with Pierre-Luc Dubois. Yeah, let's talk about it. Today, we're going to be breaking down all the trade rumors and all the latest news so that you guys can get filled in. And of course, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new, if you're enjoying the content and want to see more trade rumor content just like this all throughout the offseason, because guys, there is going to be a ton that you don't want to miss. Now, before we get into all the Dubois craziness, I first want to show you guys my sleeper picks from yesterday. I absolutely hit on this, winning $68 from $10 with a Nylander, McAvoy, and Coyle predictions all hitting. We're going to hopefully continue the hot streak tonight. I got 4 other picks as well. Jack Eichel, more than 0.5 points in game 6. He's been incredibly consistent. The Knights are going to force a game 7. I think Eichel's going to be a huge part of that. I also got Tyler Myers, more than 1.5 blocks. He has been tested in this series, but I think he'll continue to show through. I got Jason Robertson, more than 0.5 points. He was great in that game 5. I think he's going to continue that in game 6. And then UC Saros, less than 23.5 shots on goal. Vancouver's always gone quality over quantity, really this entire season in the shot department. I think that's going to continue, putting $10 down to M53. And if you guys want to join me on Sleeper Fantasy and make your own NHL, NBA picks, you can go in the description, click on the link there, and sign up. Use promo code GRAV on your first deposit, and you'll get up to a $500 match. If you put $20 in, you'll get 20 free bucks with Sleeper. And now is the best time to get started with everything going on in the sports world. And every time you guys sign up, it helps the channel a ton. So every bit is appreciated. Now let's talk about Pierre-Luc Dubois again, because it feels like we've been talking about him all year, but for very good reason. This season with LA has just been an utter disappointment. And after all the trade rumors surrounding Dubois from Winnipeg and how much this guy could have been a difference maker, he was anything but for this Kings team. In fact, he wasn't just a difference maker, he was a net negative in terms of the attention, in terms of the drama this season. They had to play him all over the lineup to try and get any results possible, and nothing really seemed to stick. And you can understand that with just how he played this year, especially with that $8.5 million contract extension kicking in with LA. You could see what he was able to do in his first year there. In 82 games, got 16 goals, 24 assists for 40 points. And there was a time where he wasn't even on pace to get 40 points. He was somewhat better in the last couple of months for LA, but that was better than garbage. So I guess it's better than nothing. And in the playoffs, as you can see, in 5 games, he got 1 goal for 1 point and at 20 penalty minutes. He had some rough penalties throughout that series and ones that ultimately cost LA a lot of goals, especially with how good the Oilers power play was. Dubois was almost a weapon for the Oilers roster. The game plan was simple: get Dubois to take penalties and score on the power play, and for the Oilers, it worked pretty well. And it really was a shame because, especially when we were talking about a Dubois trade, he was a difference maker for the Jets last year. 63 points in 73 games and was pretty consistent throughout the whole year, probably his most consistent season in the NHL. But of course, the Winnipeg Jets would deal him to LA, and we now know the rest is history. This year, he pretty much played in every position possible. He went from being the second line center behind Kopitar and a first line center of the future, which is what LA traded him to being a guy on that bottom 6, to being a winger throughout the lineup, and ultimately at the end of the year, being as the 4th line center in LA's depth charts. Not where you want to be, especially when you're LA's 2nd highest paid forward. And you can see as we go game through game, there were points where Dubois was playing only 13 minutes and 15 seconds in a single game. And even though there were some hits here and there, he was largely a non-factor and only got 4 shots total in the entire series. Really, this entire season for Dubois hasn't been pretty. It's been a joke. It's been a clown show. For how talented of a player Dubois is, it's baffling the lack of effort we saw at various points throughout the season. It wasn't just one cold streak throughout the year. It was multiple points where just the inconsistencies were just inexcusable. The times where he would go out there and look invisible shift to shift for an entire game. The times where he would go out there and just go for a cardio skate. It was far too many times to count for a guy getting paid as much as Dubois was. If he's going to get paid like he is the guy, he better show he's the guy. And so far in LA, he has never shown that. And it has gotten so bad for the LA Kings that now there is talk that a buyout for Dubois is actually possible. Yeah, that's right. After trading for him last offseason, after bringing on a player of $8.5 million, after bringing him on to be such a big part of the future, a year later, a buyout could actually happen. It was first brought up by Dennis Bernstein of the Fourth Period on TSN, talking about the buyout being an option, being a possibility, and Bernstein is pretty connected with the LA Kings, has been for a long time. If he's saying it, there's some truth to it. You had this article in The Athletic by Eric Duhacek talking about the Dubois situation, and there were some pretty scathing quotes. Special teams ultimately were the reason the Kings lost, but it was hard to watch Dubois play and wonder what was going on. Shift in, shift out, he seemed alternatively disinterested, slow, unwilling to engage, and mostly out of sync with whomever he happened to be on the ice with. He was a maddeningly frustrating player to watch in previous stops in Winnipeg and Columbus because of his inconsistency, and that spilled over into his time with LA. And what's crazy, he'll earn $11.25 million for 2025, and then he gets a further salary bump to $11.35 million in 2026 before his annual salary starts to drop. So not only is Dubois playing his worst hockey, he's about to get a raise doing it. What's crazy is that he'll apparently be making more than Connor McDavid, who will make $10 million in salary. I don't know who Dubois' agent is, but that guy is pretty slick with it. Now, this article on Sportsnet also gives us a really interesting idea about this, saying because Dubois is only 25 years old, that means he can be bought out for 1/3 of his remaining contract value. If a player is 26 or older when they're bought out, it costs 2/3 the remaining value. Dubois will turn 26 on June 24th. And now here's where it gets interesting. The first buyout window opens either on June 15th or 48 hours after the Stanley Cup final ends, whichever is later. And according to the NHL Key Dates calendar, the last possible day of this year's Stanley Cup final is June 24th. So if the playoffs go late enough, the Kings may not even have the opportunity to buy out Dubois at 1/3 the rate. Now, John Pug gives us a couple of screenshots here on the Dubois buyout from Cap Friendly, what it could look like, what it could be if they were to do it at that 1/3 rate. If the Kings were to buy out Dubois right now, today, somehow, this is what it would look like for them in the future. You can see it usually hovers around 1.1 million. There's a few years, though, where it goes up to 3.8, which would really hurt them quite a bit. You can see in terms of total cost over the next little bit for an actual buyout for Dubois, it would cost LA about $27.8 million. And you compare that to what the Kings would be giving him if they kept Dubois in the first place, and they, over the course of this contract, would be giving him $68 million in AAV and as well in total salary. So it's either you buy out Dubois for a little bit less than half of his deal, or you just keep him around and try to make it work. And man, I do not envy LA whatsoever. This is the big problem for me, is that how can you buy out Dubois, but how can you not buy out Dubois, or at least get rid of him at this point, because he just seems like a distraction for this Kings team. It's just ultimately not a very good fit, especially if they're going to keep their current coach in Hiller, who implemented this 1-3-1 system, this tight defensive system where Dubois obviously is not going to work out with it. It just feels like a complete disconnect, and this is completely 100% on GM Rob Blake, who somehow thought that this fit would end up working, especially getting rid of the depth and the youth they had in Velarde and Iafallo for Dubois, who has just not been able to do anything in his time with LA. It is an absolute stain on his record, that's for sure. And it simply made LA worse. It simply put themselves in a worse position. And if you're a team like that was trying to get better with the Dubois trade, I could see where they're coming from, going and making a deal like that. But with the character that Dubois is, with what we've seen out of his time in the NHL, there is just so many red flags here that the LA Kings probably should have been anticipating. At the time when the contract was even signed, I thought $8.5 million was quite a bit rich for how little he was able to prove consistently, and I thought if Dubois was able to play to his potential in LA, then maybe it could end up working out, but even then, it was a maybe. It wasn't more than just a possibility, and now we've seen the worst of Dubois. Maybe that turns the corner, and the best is yet to come now, but Pierre-Luc Dubois has officially hit rock bottom, and it just doesn't feel like it's going to get that much better. It likely will as Dubois' shooting percentages and luck increases, but the actual play on the ice, how could Dubois give you what he did this year and actually be confident in him going forward? You just can't, and that's why a buyout has been discussed. Unfortunately for the LA Kings, I also agree with Jack Hahn here, saying that PLD is more of a winger than a center, more of a shooter than a playmaker, and those things I think are true. And the unfortunate part for LA is that they are going to be probably overpaying Dubois in any situation here. But I think you can try to salvage this player by putting him in a better position full-time, likely on the wing, and just not really relying on him to be the guy. Unfortunately, you're already paying him to be the guy, but at this point, I think that's a lost cause. If Pierre-Luc Dubois had like 50% better work ethic, I would say he's at least a point per game guy in the NHL, at the very least. The talent is unbelievable. You can see it, you can sense it when he makes these great plays every so often. But the fact that he isn't able to realize that consistently, as we said before, he is the most frustrating player out there, with the potential, with so much going for him, yet just failing time and time again. I gotta say though, for the team behind me in the Montreal Canadiens, they sure dodged an absolute bullet here. I was kind of on the train of Dubois going to Montreal. I thought it would have been really fun to see this Quebec kid come into the Habs and be a really interesting part of the future, but I didn't really think he would fix their problems necessarily. I didn't think that he would be the guy much more than Nick Suzuki was, and to me, I think there was still a little bit of a franchise talent problem. In Dubois' case, especially the asking price too, that was something that I was kind of worried about, especially in Montreal's side. But man, I'd never expected that this trade would be so bad, so consequential for this LA Kings team. And the fact the Habs didn't make it, especially in the position they were in, still being a rebuilding team, I mean, imagine the assets that they would have had to give up, especially to a team like Winnipeg, to have to get this type of player. Thank goodness they didn't. And just thinking about what they might have had to give up, like a first-round pick, a Josh Waugh, maybe another top defensive prospect. Who knows if it was going to be an Arbor Xhekaj or somebody as big as a Lane Hudson. I mean, we can only theorize up to this point, but I'm just glad the Habs didn't end up paying for it in the end, because they need the opposite of what Pierre-Luc Dubois is. And that's what they've really been building. I would say that was maybe the biggest thing that kind of maybe turned away the possibility of him actually going to the Habs in the first place, was just how much Montreal has really prioritized character and work ethic and everything, which in Pierre-Luc Dubois' case, I just don't feel like is a priority. And maybe that's why the Habs didn't do the deal in the end. This Kings team is just really in a weird spot in the future. They feel like the Rangers light, where they had this rebuilding process, bringing in a ton of younger players, but brought on a ton of veterans and trades and signings to fill out the roster, and really didn't prioritize development all that much. I've liked a lot of the picks they made, but it's been a lot of skill first, a lot of finesse type of projects, and a lot of those guys just haven't really worked out for them. They've had a couple of pretty great picks, like Quinton Byfield, of course. He's worked out pretty well for them. You've got a couple of guys on the defense as well, like Mikey Anderson over the years, that have put in some big results. But for the most part, a lot of their rebuilding picks, a lot of their big time selections haven't worked out and haven't really been given much of an opportunity or time to really succeed either. You just go down the list, and they've had a couple of solid picks over the years, but then you look at the top end guys, and of course, Velarde was traded. Anderson Dolan really wasn't a factor for them. Rasmus Kupari really wasn't a factor for them either, and was a part of the Dubois deal. Akil Thomas hasn't really been given much of an opportunity at all in the NHL level. Alex Turcotte, a lot of health issues, but also hasn't been getting much of an opportunity. Tobias Bjornfoot, they basically gave up on almost completely. Arthur Kaliev, they're not even playing, even though he was one of the better scorers over the past couple of seasons for them. You got Quinton Byfield, who was a good pick, but they traded Granz, they traded Faber. Simon Tavel has barely been a factor for them. Brant Clark, they're not even playing in the NHL, even though they absolutely could have versus Edmonton, and probably should have. You just go down the list and all these different guys, and even though there was a couple of good picks and players I think will be great players in Byfield and Clark, it just hasn't been enough to completely revamp that roster. And the guys they brought in, a lot of them haven't really worked out completely either. Dubois obviously is the biggest disaster, but besides a couple of good exceptions like Gavrikov and Deneau, they just haven't been good enough to really supplant the future and give them a much better timeline. And to me, that all falls on GM Rob Blake for providing this team just mediocrity. I mean, this team is mediocre in so many ways, and it's sad because I thought at the start of this season, they were one of my cup favorites. They were genuinely playing brilliantly, but it just wasn't really sustainable for them with a roster they had. And it just feels like they really sped run that rebuild, like the Rangers, but they didn't have the quality of free agents or the quality of players already there to be able to bring contending play. The guys they already had were aging, and Kopitar and Doughty, and they've done as much as they could to keep this LA Kings team relevant, but they're just too old and too close to retirement to put them over the hump. But I'm Let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think of the future of this LA Kings team? Are you more hopeful in them than I am? What do you think about the Dubois situation? Do you think they should trade him and try to get as many assets back? Do you think they should buy him out and go in a different direction? Or do you think they should try to recoup any value, keep him on the roster, and try to make it work? I would love to know all your thoughts down below. And of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you guys enjoyed today's vid and want to see more just like it. You can also click on this card for all of my training word content in one playlist for you to binge right there. So much good stuff over there. And of course, share the video with all the hockey fans, all the Kings fans you guys know online. And I will see you guys in the next one. I hope you have a fantastic hockey day. Continue enjoying the playoffs, y'all, because it is sick. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.